Good, everyone? All right. Well, thank you for being here this morning. And let me thank you for joining us here today at the Miami-Dade Emergency Operations Center. We just came from the National Hurricane Center, where Director Graham provided a detailed briefing of their operations. I'd like to recognize FEMA Administrator Pete Gaynor, Commandant of the United States Coast Guard, Admiral Schultz. There we go. Who also joined me at the National Hurricane Center. Governor Ron DeSantis, as well as Mayor Gimenez, also participated in that briefing. Governor DeSantis has been an outstanding partner with the Department of Homeland Security, and I'm glad to see him here today. He's worked, I know he's worked proactively to address the needs of Florida residents during the COVID pandemic, to include the disembarkation of over hundreds of thousands of cruise ship passengers here in Florida. You and your team have distributed personal protective equipment to nursing homes early on, and now you're increasing reimbursement to nursing homes to serve COVID-19 patients and deploying a mobile RV unit to test nursing home residents and workers. Also grateful that Mayor Gimenez is here today, and we also have spent the majority of the morning together as well. Our partnerships with local leaders are critical to our mission success. So again, thank you for joining us. The work being done at the National Hurricane Center is critical in aiding the department's efforts to protect our homeland. The fact that they have continued operation in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic is a testament to their dedication and work ethic. And thanks to the efforts to the men and women of the National Hurricane Center, DHS and its partners are ready to respond to the already historic 2020 hurricane season. In addition to NOAA, DHS through FEMA operates the National Hurricane Program, conducting training, outreach, and planning for our state, local, tribal, and territorial partners. The operational component of the National Hurricane Program, the Hurricane Liaison Team, is stationed at the National Hurricane Center. We greatly value their coordination efforts with NOAA. Through our department's experience leading COVID-19 response efforts, DHS and FEMA are better prepared to respond to this year's hurricane season than at any point in our history. We've learned that disaster preparedness, response, and recovery all require a locally executed, state-managed, and federally supported strategy. State and local authorities are first responders when it comes to this preparedness, response, and recovery. FEMA is here to provide resources to address any unmet needs. This teamwork is effective because it allows us to have the flexibility we need to respond to the unique needs of each impacted locality. We saw just how effective this teamwork can be during COVID-19 response efforts, and will continue to support our state and local partners as they continue to respond to the pandemic and any future natural disasters. To further prepare for the 2020 hurricane season specifically, FEMA just recently released their COVID-19 pandemic operational guidance for the 2020 hurricane season. This guide is important because it will assist emergency managers and public health officials in preparing for response and recovery operations during the ongoing COVID pandemic. I'm confident that the department's adaptations and natural disaster preparation will prove valuable in quick response and recovery throughout the nation. FEMA is always ready to take on any challenges and provide the necessary support to state and local governments. For the past 90 days, FEMA's response to the COVID-19 pandemic has allowed them to get a running start into hurricane season. Forecasts and models like those produced at the National Hurricane Center become even more important in a COVID-19 environment as they directly inform critical evacuation decisions. The department has stockpiled supplies at 8 distribution centers in the U.S., Puerto Rico, and Guam, which include everything from bottled water to baby formula. These distribution centers will make sure that those impacted by any future natural disaster will have the supplies they need as soon as they need them. In addition to commodities, FEMA has teams that are focused on urban search and rescue, communications, and logistics support pre-positioned around the country. And looking beyond our immediate response efforts, FEMA has updated its approach to incident management to ensure impacted communities can reopen as quickly as possible after a disaster occurs. So while we can't control natural disasters, we can control how we prepare and respond to them. Our actions and efforts from organizations like the National Hurricane Center provide us the best chance to keep the American people safe. So on behalf of Americans everywhere, I'm grateful for all of the hard work the men and women of DHS have put in ahead of the hurricane season. Again, thank you for your time today. Let me ask Governor DeSantis to step forward, say a few words. Thank you.
Well, thanks to Acting Secretary Wolf for being here today. I also want to thank FEMA Administrator Pete Gaynor for coming down today. From day one of the COVID pandemic, the Department of Emergency Management here in Florida has continued planning for hurricane season. Over the past 18 months, the division has invested in emergency management to increase capabilities, and we expect those investments to pay dividends in a year where we anticipate an active hurricane season. You will see sheltering and evacuations may look a little bit different this year. Very early on, the division created a PPE reserve for hurricane season, and right now the division has more than 10 million masks on hand that can be handed out to shelters and used by people working at shelters. The division also secured a long-term deal with Honeywell to receive 12 million N95 masks, which can also be used for hurricane season. I directed the division to purchase 50 generators to make sure we can get the power back on quickly if areas are hard hit, and this is the most generators that the state has ever owned. The divisions also use guidance from CDC, FEMA, and the American Red Cross to create its own sheltering guidance, and has provided that to counties. Obviously, that involves physical distancing within shelters. Typically, these are things like gymnasiums, auditoriums. The division's also planning, if necessary, to use some non-congregate sheltering. These would be alternative facilities, even like a hotel, to allow for more space and separation. And the division is working with counties and with FEMA to expand non-congregate sheltering. We're also at the state level recommending that shelters use temperature checks and other screening criteria to identify individuals who may have COVID-19 and isolate them from the rest of the population. The division has 5,000 thermometers set aside for hurricane shelters. And so this is all in addition to the normal precautions that would be doing. One thing that's important to look as we've dealt with storms is the recovery. And one of the things that we've really worked hard to do is to get the funding to the communities who've been impacted. And I want to thank the President. I want to thank Administrator Gaynor for helping Florida get FEMA reimbursements faster than we've been able to do in years past. They also made sure that Florida had a disaster declared for COVID-19. I was just able to announce that we will be receiving more than $250 million in reimbursements for actions taken during COVID-19. Since January of 2019, the state has sent out more than $2.4 billion, including $700 million for Hurricane Michael. I also directed Director Moskowitz to ramp up these reimbursements as we were responding to COVID-19. And so since March 15th, the division has paid out more than $450 million for statewide hurricane recovery. Furthermore, we just received an agreement from USDA to administer $380 million with timber block grants for Hurricane Michael, and I'm looking forward to getting the funding out to timber farmers. It's important for folks throughout the state to prepare and have a plan now that we're in hurricane season. We encourage Floridians to have disaster supply kit with enough food, water, and medicine to last 7 days without power. Now, you can develop your disaster supply kit year-round. If you're out getting a 2-week supply of groceries, consider adding some items to your list that would be good to have on hand for hurricane season, like canned goods and extra batteries. Also, considering offering to pick up additional hurricane supplies for your neighbors, especially if they happen to be quarantined. We want people to start preparing now. Check out your windows, garage door, and other areas to make sure water and wind cannot enter. Make sure you also know if you're in an evacuation zone. If you're ordered to evacuate, make sure you take it seriously and follow the directives. The division's website, floridadisaster.org, has evacuation zones and has a checklist individuals can use to build their disaster supply kit. We just finished the tax-free holiday, which is very important. We were at the Home Depot in Boca Raton. It looked like a lot of people were there getting supplies, so we hope that Floridians took advantage of that. They saved, we think, about $5.6 million in purchasing critical preparedness items. We're going to keep watching seeing what's developing. As we know, we had the tropical storm that Florida got some kind of outer bans for that, but primarily affected Louisiana. We were watching that very beginning. I got to say, we were at the National Hurricane Center, and all those spaghetti plots were right at Louisiana, and that's what ended up happening. Wasn't necessarily the case with some of the other storms as we've seen, which have wobbled. So it was a really good forecast. People were able to prepare. We're going to continue to be eye on this at the state level, and I know Mayor Gimenez and other local officials will be watching this very closely. We always hope for the best, but we've got to prepare for a very active hurricane season. And so hopefully we don't have one reach landfall, but if it does, we will be ready. So I want to thank all Floridians for doing their part to prepare for hurricane season. And I'd also like to introduce a great guy, Administrator Gaynor. I don't like seeing him that often because when you do, it's usually in response to something that has happened. And so I'm glad, Pete, I'm glad you made it down here, but I hope you don't make it back this summer.
Thanks, Governor. Those are the kind of introductions I normally get. We're glad you're here, but we really don't want to see you. So thank you. It's good to be back in Florida, good to be back in Miami, and it's always a treat to visit the really a national treasure, the National Hurricane Center here in Miami. And it's always good to see elected leaders that understand the details of preparedness and are involved in that. There's probably really no more important thing that an elected leader can do. So about 90 days ago, FEMA was tasked by the president to lead the federal coordination for COVID-19 response and recovery, and we've been doing that, and we still do that today. And along the way, we always had in our mind that someday June 1st would come, and we need to be ready for hurricane season. So we collected lessons learned. We looked for best practices. We partnered up with the CDC and others to really put together a planning guide. And I have a printed copy here, a planning guide about hurricane season. What local states, tribes, and territories need to do with hurricane season here. Review your plans. Make sure that everything that you normally do, you review that, and you put the overlay of COVID-19 response to it. And the governor and the secretary mentioned some of those things. It's hard enough in a regular hurricane to do evacuations, mass care, and sheltering. This year it's going to be more complicated. You need more time. You need more plans. And so you can download that guide online, and I encourage every emergency manager that's listening today to go get that if you haven't downloaded that yet. Also included in there is a exercise starter kit, so you can test those plans to make sure the things that you're going to need to do in a COVID-19 response in a hurricane really work. FEMA is fully funded this year. Normally we start hurricane season with about $40 billion in the disaster relief fund. This year, mainly due to the COVID-19 response, we have double, $80 billion for response, which is quite sufficient. As the Secretary mentioned, warehouses are fully stocked, staff are trained and rostered and ready to go, and we've really had a head start this year. 90 days of COVID-19 response has made us more than ready than we've ever been before. And so I am highly confident that we are prepared, and I encourage all emergency managers and local elected leaders, public health officials to be prepared also. And when it comes to our citizens, no matter if the forecast this year is for a hurricane that an above average hurricane season, it really takes one hurricane to ruin everyone's day. So understand your risk. If you don't know what your risk is, look online. I'm sure most counties and local governments have places you can find what your risk is when it comes to flooding. If you're at risk of flood, buy flood insurance. Don't wait to the end. If you think you're going to buy flood insurance for a hurricane that's happening tomorrow, it doesn't work that way. You have to have bought it 30 days ahead of time. So again, if you're at risk for flooding and you need hurricanes or you need flood insurance, please buy that. If you are in a zone that you need to evacuate, historically evacuate, do you have all the COVID-19 hygiene supplies that you may need if you have to go to a shelter, whether it's congregant or non-congregant sheltering? Make sure you have all those things in your kit, things like masks and hand sanitizers. And take one action today, because the clock is ticking. It's going to be a long hurricane season, and one thing you can do today for free is download the FEMA app. And in that is a way to get connected, understand risk in your neighborhood, and get connected to alerts and warnings. All our success preparing for all hazards really depends on everyone being prepared. So from individuals to neighborhoods to businesses, local, state, tribes, and territory for a really great response. It takes all of us working together, and so please do that today. And with that, I'll introduce the mayor of Miami-Dade County, Mayor Gimenez.
Thank you, and hello, everybody. I want to welcome Homeland Security Acting Secretary Chad Wolf, Coast Guard Admiral Carl Schultz, NOAA Hurricane Center Director Kenneth Graham, and Federal Emergency Management Administrator Pete Gaynor to our EOC here in Miami-Dade County. I hope you have a little bit of time to spare after this, and we can show you around. We're very proud of our capabilities here. Also with us today is Governor Ron DeSantis, whose leadership during this pandemic has been pivotal for our success in tamping down COVID-19 here in Miami-Dade County. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership and help. Thank you for all your help. As you know, the 2020 hurricane season is upon us, and we have made changes to our plan to avoid the spread of the virus. And as the director said, the administrator said, it looks like it's going to be a pretty busy season. We're already on the sea storm, and and we're still in the first early stages of June. Remember Hurricane Andrew, and he was right, it only takes one. Hurricane Andrew was August 24th. That's how busy this season appears to be. So this year we have expanded our capacity at evacuation centers to give people more space. We're doubling our space to about 40 square feet per person, up from 20 square feet per person due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We now have 81 evacuation centers here in Miami-Dade County with a capacity to house over 112,000 people. If needed, we will actually open more. Everyone will receive a kit when they arrive at these centers with masks, gloves, and hand sanitizer, and they'll also be screened for any symptoms. All of our COVID-19 precautions at these centers follow the recommendations of the CDC. More than half of our county's 2.8 million residents live in storm surge evacuation zones, so have a safety plan to leave if necessary. When we face the next storm, I want to remind everyone to rely on accurate, up-to-date information. Prepare now. Upload the county's Ready Miami-Dade app on your cell phone. Go over to our hurricane guide, which everyone received in their mailbox. Everybody in Miami-Dade County received our hurricane guide. Please go over it. Click on miamidade.gov and sign up for our alerts, or call the 311 contact center. Also, Mr. Secretary, thank you for FEMA's role and cooperation here in Miami-Dade County. As the Secretary and the Governor said, this takes federal, state, and local partners all working together to safeguard the people of Miami-Dade. I think you'll be heartened to know that we are one of the few counties in the United States that have two urban search and rescue teams, FEMA urban search and rescue teams. And also thank you for sponsoring those teams. So we have those capabilities right here in our hometown. Again, prepare. We are prepared. We have made our changes for COVID-19, and get prepared for this busy hurricane season. And Mr. Secretary, I hope it's the last time I see you during this hurricane season for hurricane purposes, because if you come back, that means something happened here, which we don't really want. So thank you very much for all your cooperation. I want to say a couple of words in Spanish. Buenas tardes. Este año hemos ampliado nuestra capacidad en los centros de evacuación para evitar el contagio de COVID-19. Ahora tenemos 81 centros de evacuación para albergar 112,000 personas. Si es necesario, podemos abrir más. Para prevenir el contagio del virus, estamos ampliando el espacio entre personas. De la separación será de 40 pies cuadrados. Ya lo subimos de 20 pies cuadrados. Todas van a recibir un kit cuando lleguen a estos centros, incluyendo máscaras, guantes y desinfectante de manos. También le vamos a preguntar sobre la salud. Cuando nos enfrentamos a la próxima tormenta, quiero recordarles a todos que solo confíen en la información que es correcta. Usen la aplicación Ready Miami-Dade en su teléfono celular. Repasen la guía de huracanes del condado que ya le enviamos por correo. Vayan a nuestro sitio web miamidade.gov y regístrense para recibir nuestras alertas o llamen al 311. Gracias a todos por estar aquí. And I think now it's time to, is there somebody else who's going to speak? I don't think so. So I think that the governor and the secretary and I can take some questions.
Mayor, for every email that we are getting back here, people want to know, when are you opening the beaches?
We plan to open the beaches no later than Wednesday, and so I'll be talking to my police director today, and we're going to talk about the curfew for tonight. There's a good possibility that we lift the curfew tonight. We need a little bit of time to get the people prepared to open up the beaches, so I want to do that no later than Wednesday.
Can you also talk about the citizens investigative?
Ok, puede ser que vamos a cancelar el toque de queda hoy, de hoy de la noche a las 9, así que cancelarlo. Pero tengo que hablar con el director de la policía. También esperamos que vamos a abrir las playas el miércoles.
¿Y los arrestos del fin de semana tiene un número?
No tengo número para esos arrestos, así que lo puedo conseguir. And so you had one?
Can you also talk about the citizens investigative panel that you tweeted something today that you were in discussion with the part of the commission?
So in discussion with the chairwoman of the commission about initiating a civilian investigative panel. But remember, I was in favor of the civilian investigative panel. I vetoed it because I didn't want just representation from special interest groups. If we're going to have a civilian investigative panel, it has to be made up of people from the community, all the community, and so that it's people that will hear both sides and come up to a the right verdict.
Following up on that, the Miami-Dade Police today issued an open letter to the community, kind of discussing, that they don't use chokeholds and different things. I mean, talk a little bit about that and the importance of that.
The Miami-Dade Police Department is one of the best, if not the best, police department in the United States. We have about 3,000 officers. We are deeply embedded in the community, and one of the reasons why you haven't seen the kind of chaos that has actually perpetrated other communities around the United States is because we are embedded in the community. We had intelligence from the community telling us that there were outside agitators here to try to create problems. And the Miami-Dade Police Department, along with the City of Miami, I think, have done an outstanding job in allowing and actually protecting protesters and having them exercise their First Amendment rights, which we will protect, but we will also protect life and property here in Miami-Dade. And so the things that we've done in Miami-Dade, we were one of the first major departments in the United States to have body cameras on all of their officers. We actually have people from the community, ex-cons, that come and teach our rookie classes how to police in the neighborhoods and what is expected of the police department, and a host of other programs where our officers are in the streets, in the homes, talking to our neighbors all around Miami-Dade County. And that's why they have that great reputation, and that's why I think also they're helping us to make sure that the protests are what they should be, which is peaceful protests to protest a horrible event that happened in Minneapolis.
County Carlos Suarez with NBC here. In terms of county evacuations, you mentioned 80. Does that number include places like hotels, the non-congregation spaces, or is that separate?
No, the 80 that we have are the 80 evacuation centers that we have with the Miami-Dade County, the Miami-Dade Public School System. And so we work with the school system, and Miami-Dade County and the school system are the ones that actually open them, operate them. We've identified 80 of them. We have the capacity for 112,000. In terms of the non-congregate facilities like the hotels, the problem that we have in Miami-Dade is that with a Cat 5 storm, we only have a small number of hotels that actually lie in areas that are not evacuation zones. And so we're checking those out, and when we find them, then we'll be able to use them also for evacuations.
Lo de los hoteles, si se van a utilizar.
Con COVID-19 lo están exigiendo que si podemos abrir hoteles para evacuación. Eso es muy difícil en el condado de Miami-Dade porque las áreas de inundación, de evacuación, con una categoría 5, quiere decir que no hay muchos hoteles que no están en esas áreas de evacuación, así que no podemos tener un refugio, ¿no?, en una área de evacuación, y por eso es que es difícil, pero lo estamos buscando, lo estamos analizando a ver cuántos de ellos podemos usar.
¿Qué piensan utilizar?
¿Qué otras facilidades entonces para ampliarse?
Siempre son las escuelas del sistema escolar del condado de Miami-Dade. Tenemos 80 de ellos. Tienen una capacidad de 112,000 personas de refugio que si necesitan refugio. Pero acuérdase que esa es el último recurso es los recursos, el refugio del gobierno. Primero debe tener un plan con amigos, con familia. El refugio debe siempre ser así. Entonces, por eso es que estamos pidiendo que todas las personas tengan un plan. No piensen en lo que van a hacer cuando viene la tormenta, Piénselo ahora, cuando tengan tiempo, y hagas lo que necesitas hacer para que si tienes que evacuar, ir allá.
Alcalde, sobre justamente lo abastecerse. ¿Cómo podemos garantizar que no vaya a haber desabastecimiento y que se vuelva a causar el caos como pasó al inicio de la pandemia? En este momento que le estamos diciendo a la gente salgan a comprar lo que se necesita y que no vaya a pasar como pasó al inicio de esta pandemia y como ha pasado en otras temporadas de huracán.
No, pero no entiendo la pregunta, pero perdóname.
¿Cómo le garantizamos a la gente que va a haber suficiente, que vamos a tener suficiente agua, suficiente papel, suficiente de todo lo que necesitan y no va a haber desabastecimiento?
Muy buena. La única manera que lo puedo garantizar es si lo hace ahora. Porque si lo hace, si espera a la tormenta, que ya viene, está amenazando una tormenta, viene siempre todas las personas. Entonces, las personas que no han hecho los planes, no han comprado lo que necesitan, la comida, el agua, etcétera, salen en esos días, entonces no vas a encontrar lo que necesitas. Si quieres de verdad garantizar eso, vayas ahora a comprar la comida y todos los artículos que necesitas para una tormenta.
Administrator, real quick, in terms of the money that you have for funding, have you set any of that aside for what's happening right now in Louisiana? And then also, can you speak to some of the changes that are going to take place with respect to applications for disaster relief amid a pandemic? I'd imagine you're going to be shifting a lot of that to online services.
So all the money that's in the disaster relief fund, $80 billion, is for COVID and any natural disaster that we're going to see in the future and ongoing recovery. So it's for everything.
But you don't know what you're spending.
It's technically set aside in the fund. So it is specifically for disasters, and that's how we use it. So if it's not a disaster, we don't use that money.
Samantha Gross from the Miami Herald. I have a question for the governor. Over the past 5 days, the cases of COVID-19 have grown more than 1,000 cases per day. Can you talk a little bit about reopening and if this is a cause for concern at all as cases, continue to grow?
So we've now in the last 2 weeks averaged 30,000 test results a day in the state of Florida. If you go back to the end of March, beginning of April, we weren't even doing 10,000 test results a day. And so part of this is, I said from the very beginning, one of our goals was to increase testing just when we were entering the pandemic, but then a key part of the reopening to really have widespread testing. So we're now seeing that. And I think if you look, you're having places that have very low positivity rates. If you test 500 people one day, you'll get a certain amount. If you test 2,500, the rate may even go down a little, but you're still going to identify some of these cases. I think a couple things people should keep in mind is U.S. has probably about 2 million, quote, cases. But for every, quote, diagnosed case, there's probably 10 to 20 times as number of infections that have happened. And you see that in FEMA's recent numbers, where they said if you include asymptomatic, the infection fatality rate is 0.26, much lower than what they thought initially. And so by testing people without any criteria, you're identifying people who likely have no symptoms but can be isolated and hopefully won't infect other people. So we've had this set up in Home Depot and Publix now. It's very popular. But these are people that a lot of them don't think they're necessarily sick, but it's there so they go. And granted, 98% of them are negative, but you do find cases. The other thing we're seeing in Florida is agriculture communities that are really where the workers live really in close quarters. You've seen outbreaks in Immokalee in Collier County, Indiantown in Martin County, Belle Glade in Palm Beach, some other Palm Beach communities. And so what happens is once it goes, because you're in such close contact, it really spreads. So they've been really going and aggressively testing all those areas, and there have been mitigation strategies that have been put in. I mean, obviously, you don't want those folks mixing with the general public if you have an outbreak. So there have been a number of things in those communities that have been done, and I think that they're going to continue to do it. Also, throughout, and we didn't have as many in the last couple days, but you have more prison cases at this facility in Miami-Dade. They're now going to test more widely in that facility since they find cases. I guarantee you will get a lot of cases out of that, because that's the type of environment that it really spreads very quickly. Also, we have done really since April, have been working really hard at testing all the long-term care facilities. And so we're almost completed with having tested every resident and staff member. I think the target date for that is the end of the week. What we find in the long-term care, I think tremendously for Florida, over 80%, we have over 4,000 facilities. Over 80% of the facilities have not had a single case since this all started. So that's a good thing. At the same time, the infection percentage positive for staff members is about what it is for the general public, about 3%. For residents of the facilities, it's been about 8%, so a little higher, and I think that's just part of it. If you have one staff, and they're infected, they likely will infect more than one resident. So we're going to continue to do that, but I think you got to keep testing the staff on a periodic basis. So we're definitely going to keep doing that, which I think is very important. But it's really, I mean, you see prison outbreaks, now these agriculture communities, and the nursing homes are just going to continue to be a battle going forward. But I think we need to be continuing to test at a high level. I think that's the right thing to do. I said when we reopen, we're going to double testing. People are going to say, oh my gosh, there's more cases. But I think if you understand the nature of this disease, particularly when you're testing people like in these ag communities, a lot of these people are 30, 40, 20 years old. So clinical consequences are very low of that. And I would also say, I mean, Mayor Gimenez, what's the ventilator now in Miami-Dade?
About 50.
And what did you have at the peak?
About 140.
Yeah, so, they're down. Miami was at 140 for their peak for ventilator use. Now they're down to 50. When we were at the peak for ICU statewide, I think it hit something like 860. When we started phase one, and we didn't even have Miami in that, it was in the 600s. Now it's in the 400s for COVID patients in ICUs. And so that's really, I think, looking at the clinical consequences. But testing more is good. It's more convenient than ever before. But don't mistake identifying more cases for thinking that there were more cases one day compared to 2 months ago. If you're testing 3 times as much and you have a disease with a lot of and remember, the end of March, you couldn't get a test if you were asymptomatic. It was only for people that were showing symptoms per the CDC guidelines. We've really expanded that so that people want to go. If they're in Home Depot and some of these facilities do, we're probably going to start moving more of our drive-through sites into retail locations just to make it more convenient for people, because I think that's the right thing to do. But 30,000 tests a day. And we have the capacity to do even more if the demand is there. Now, we had bad weather, so some of our drive-through sites weren't open over the weekend. But typically on a day where they're all open and the weather's okay, we're usually getting about 50% capacity. Now, some do better than others. I mean, the Broward one that we did initially typically does well. Miami's usually about 50% at the facilities here. I have some, like the Panhandle, that'll get like 30 or 50 people go through the drive-through. Volusia County had like 15 people go through their drive-through the other day. And so it's not all even, but we do have capacity to do more. So I think testing more is good, and I think identifying that is really the way to go. And once you're testing at that level, you really do have a better sense of what this thing is doing in the communities. And if you take out the nursing home, the ag workers, and the jails and the prison, the percent positivity is even lower. We got a lot of counties that's like 1%. Almost every time they do, it'll be 1% will be positive. Miami, you guys are now lower. about 5%, much lower. I think one of the places that we didn't see, I haven't seen as much of a decline, Palm Beach County. Now, part of that is because of the ag, but we think that there may be some more there. So they have the Surgeon General's working with the county health department there to figure out if there's any more strategies. I think Miami does more masking and Broward does more masking. I don't think they do it as much in Palm Beach. So they're looking at what may, what we may do. But we should be done with all nursing homes by the end of the week, and that's like 350,000 people between the staffs and the residents, and to have over 80% of the facilities with no documented cases, that's a lot better than most other states have done.
Two federal senators asking for an investigation into the reemployment program in Florida.
Senators?
Yeah, no, it's federal, sorry.
Right.
And that's the first question.
From Florida?
Sorry?
The U.S. senators from Florida? Okay.
And the second question is, do you have result of the investigation you asked to the Inspector General about the function in the system, the reemployment system?
Well, I've never heard of partisan politics in Washington, D.C. before. Oh, my goodness. Can you imagine that? Look, these guys are very partisan. That's all they're doing. No, the state IG investigation is not done. It's going to take time because, this is a procurement process. There was funding. This took place over a number of years. As of now, as of last night, the state's paid over $4.6 billion out to claimants, close to 1.3 million individual claimants. So, we lost 1 million jobs in April, obviously lost some in March, so really been able to, pick this thing off the mat. We're going to continue to do more, and I think that that's the right thing to do. So we have really an unprecedented amount of employees from other agencies that have been working on this, clearing out, if people are caught up in the system, working hard to do that. So we're going to keep doing that, and it's a very high priority for the administration. Thanks.
COVID.